All right, good evening, everybody. We're going to call the meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're going to begin this evening with a public hearing on a proposed water shortage ordinance. Anyone who'd like to speak is welcome to come up to the podium when I call on you. When you get to the podium, I ask that you write your name and your address down for the minutes. I'm going to limit comments to no more than 5 minutes. If anyone would like to speak on any other subjects other than the ordinance, there's also going to be a public audience portion after that, so I'd ask you to hold those comments until then. And I think that's everything I wanted to say. Is there anybody who'd like to speak on the proposed ordinance tonight? Joan.
Joan Code 26 Whitcomb Drive. The only concern I have, I don't mind writing an ordinance. We write a lot of papers and we have a lot of mission statements and everything else, which is fine, which is a guideline. But I'm concerned about enforcement. And I think that we have to be very mindful of the consequences of putting something in that would be difficult to implement and dangerous for the public. And it's up to this Board of Selectmen to make sure that the public is comfortable with whatever you put in and the enforcement is not draconian or in any way. And that people understand that we're here to help our neighbors. We're not here to just go after our neighbors. So as a community, we should work together to make something good happen. And that's all I'm concerned about. Well, we have plenty of water. There's no problem with water at this point in time. But enforcement's an issue when you're dealing with neighbors and friends and family and everything. So it's up to you people to make sure we're protected. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joan. Mr. Kalishman?
Thank you. Robert Kalishman. I ran across something I like to more or less quote to you. It's from Edmund Burke. When the leaders choose to make themselves bidders at an auction of popularity, their talent in the construction of the state will be of no service. They will become flatterers instead of legislators, the instrument, not the guide of the people. Makes a lot of sense. What I'm hearing in regard to this water ordinance is the first thing is the Constitution of the United States. I think it's going to be an infringement on the people's constitutional rights, both federal and state. Secondly, we're supposedly, year after year, we're told by Mr. Shewitsky and others during the zoning and various projects that we have an aquifer that's next to none, that's water, and it's beautiful. And we went out of our way to sell before my time, to sell the Simsbury Water Company, and we sold that to people downstate in Bridgeport. And to my mind, I'm still trying to figure out how you go all the way to Bridgeport when you had the MDC right over the mountain. But nevertheless, that was done. The other thing is I attended all the meetings of the Charter Revision Commission, and in not one discussion in the charter was it ever mentioned that there should be a water control board or we should control the water of the people. And the thing that we have the citizens. Some have wells, and if the well is properly and has been properly maintained and hasn't been contaminated by the DDT that we're dealing now with, all this farmlands that's around it is all contaminated because of overuse. We're going to run into a similar situation where we're going to have all this water and nobody's going to be able to use it. So I think that we have it. People should be more or less left to their own recognizance, and they should be allowed to use the water as they see fit. You know, people are good, and I think if there, God forbid, there is a water shortage and it's announced properly by the citizens and a notice is sent out by the town manager, that the people will react and they'll be their own conservator. So I don't think we really need this water bill. In addition to that, I find it odd that my opponent, I'm running for the State House, District 16, the state representative from Simsbury, and I find out my opponent, John Hampton, goes back to the Farmington watershed. And we have the Farmington watershed, and I think if you look at your budget, I think every year we give them money. The people that run the watershed, the chief executive officer receives a salary from the taxpayers of Simsbury. And I noticed lately that my opponent is trying to push for a bill of water in the State House. And it wasn't long ago where he ran and he wanted to shut off the water to the college students from Farmington River. We're going to take the Farmington River and they're going to funnel the water up to stores, and he was totally against it. And what we have here, now he has a water bill. And I think that's all this water ordinance is an extension of John Hampton, that he wants it, and I was at the meeting. There were a few members here that voted, and they didn't accept it. They figured everything should be done. And lo and behold, Mr. Kelly revived it. He saved the ordinance. And it's in the minutes when, if we really got to go into names, you're looking at me, I'll go into names. Mr. Askham was totally against it, and the Board of Selectmen agreed with him, and Mr. Kelly revised the issue, and before we know it, we had people coming in, and we have this dinosaur. That's all it is. Thank you for the
Thanks, Mr. Kalishman.
addressment.
Is there anybody else who'd like to
Don't
speak on
need
the water ordinance? Yes, Marjorie.
Good evening. I'm Marjorie Winters, Roaringbrook. I'm not 111 Oak Farms Road. I'm here to express my support for the water shortage ordinance before you tonight. As a bit of background, I have a bachelor's degree in physical geography and geology and a master's of science in physical geography with an emphasis on hydrology and geohydrology. Before moving to Simsbury, I was an environmental scientist with Argonne National Labs in Chicago and worked on environmental impact statements for major energy projects. I served for 7 years, first as a board member and later as a staff member on the statewide river advocacy organization, Rivers Alliance of Connecticut, where as a staff member, I was co-chair and co-author of the 2002 Water Allocation Task Force report, which was a collaborative report written by representatives from regional, municipal, and private water companies, representatives from the then DEP, the Department of Public Health, and other environmental organizations. This report examined issues and challenges that face water allocation in Connecticut, including drought management. And in Simsbury, I've served on the Conservation Commission and Inland Wetlands Agency since 2001. I'm currently their chair. I'd like to commend the efforts of the Conservation Commissioner, Don Rieger, who really spearheaded this drive to create these ordinances, as well as the members of the town, this board, the town staff, and the staff of the local water companies who worked together to fine-tune these proposed ordinances. The impetus for creating these ordinances was last year's severe drought, and it is to the town's credit and credit to all involved in this process that the conservation continued as the weather turned from dry to soggy. Quite often, as soon as it starts to rain, everyone drops the drought ordinance effort. It's exactly when we don't have a drought that we need to work on these drought management ordinances. It's the best time to write them. These ordinances would serve Simsbury well when, not if, we have another severe drought. And as a geologist, I know in the 1600s there was an extremely severe drought in New England, And these things could have, that lasted many, many, many years, decades. And these things can happen again. So it's a testimony to the town's ability to plan for such eventualities, and I urge the Board of Selectmen to approve these ordinances. These are things that the state has encouraged the towns to do. They've left it to the towns because each town has a different geology. They know their own hydrology. The water companies have been supporting this. It gives tools to the town that if there are shortages, it would be something that the town can do something about. Even if you have a well and you've got a neighbor who has a well, what you do in your well does affect. And from a conservation point of view, when we use water excessively, it has a profound impact on our local streams and wetlands. So from the conservation point of view, drought ordinances would make sense as well. So I thank you for your time and good luck with your deliberations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marjorie.
Thank
Is
you.
there anybody else who'd like to speak on the water shortage ordinance? Okay. With that, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. One thing I should have done at the top of the meeting is introduce Tom Roy, who is sitting in tonight for our town manager. Maria Capriola and Melissa Appleby, our deputy town manager, are both at a professional development opportunity tonight. So thank you for stepping in.
Thank you.
So now we're going to turn to our regular public audience. Again, 5 minutes to speak, and if anybody needs additional time, I'm always glad to stay afterwards. Joan.
Joan Coe, 26 Whitcomb Drive. The town just received a local prevention council grant. The summary of submission, I quote, "Each year the Community and Social Services Department applies for a local prevention council grant to provide funds for substance abuse prevention. Funds are used to purchase naloxone, Narcan, for our police officers to carry and to engage in distracted driving education and enforcement activities. If the grant is awarded in full, the amount would be $5,817.50, end quote. According to the police department records, Narcan was used 8 times in 2017 and 4 times in 2018 to the present. According to the World Health Organization, alcohol consumption killed more than 3 million people in 2016. About 1/3 of alcohol-related deaths were a result of injuries, including car crashes, while about 1 in 5 were due to either health issues, cancer, or mental health disorders. Alcohol has become an entry drug into drug addiction, with many children having access to alcohol when very young. Many families have members with accepted alcohol addiction. Alcohol addiction has devastated many families, causing divorce and family violence. Alcohol addiction has affected all age groups. Alcohol is the entry-level mind-altering drug that leads to marijuana addiction and opioid addiction. It appears that an addict will escalate their drug use as the high diminishes over time. Recently, the Simsbury Police Department was called to an overdose where the person was too far gone to resuscitate with Narcan. The person was Simsbury resident. It is alleged that this person had a history of drug addiction that escalated out of control. It is alleged that this person had a journal with many entries and a cell phone that could be used in a thorough investigation into finding the person who supplied the drugs. Surrounding police departments have investigated and arrested drug dealers. Several years ago, the Simsbury Police Department supplied an officer to the Regional Narcotics Task Force. With drug addiction on the rise, it would be prudent to allocate an officer to investigate suppliers and users of addictive drugs in Simsbury. It appears that alcohol consumption plays an integral part of recreational activity in Simsbury by allowing alcohol consumption on town property. The Simsbury Performing Arts promotes alcohol consumption with the sale of alcohol at most of their events. The Simsbury Golf Course has an alcohol road from the golf area into the recreation complex to bypass people using the recreation complex. Most fundraising events in Simsbury have either the sale or distribution of alcohol. The introduction of marijuana for medical use has increased the use in families and is easily obtainable for family members. Many people are daily users of marijuana, a gateway drug to more addictive substances. The Simsbury Performing Arts Center allows marijuana use at their concerts without any police interference. Vaping devices are not just being used for nicotine, they are also being used to vaporize THC, the chemical responsible for most marijuana's mind-altering effects. Each Juul, which lasts about 200 puffs, has as much nicotine as an entire pack of cigarettes. Vaping and juuling has become an addictive substance of choice for underage children and have created undue pressures in the Simsbury school system. All mind-altering drugs combined with over-the-counter drugs can induce more profound results. All package stores selling alcohol beverages in Simsbury are one of the drivers of Simsbury's economic development. Many of the pubs and bars in the area, another business that drives economic development in Simsbury. It appears that alcohol consumption is the main driver of economic development in Simsbury. Alcohol consumption is legal for adults, but to use but not abuse. Alcohol consumption at most Simsbury events sends a signal to the youth that alcohol consumption is condoned for use for entertainment. The town manager should review the policy of using alcohol on town property in the context of town liability. September 7, 2018, the Simsbury Performing Arts held a September Fest event at Simsbury Meadows. There was a $5 entry fee imposed on adults. Exempt from the fees were people working in tents and volunteers. The fees for tents for the exhibitors were arbitrary, with some exhibitors complaining about the inconsistent fees getting a partial refund for use. The fees for the blow-ups were excessive, with a day pass at $30 per child. Several years after the purchase of Simsbury Meadows, parents decided to initiate a September Fest event for families with a drug-free environment. However, when the Simsbury Performing Arts took over the event, the sale of alcohol, prices imposed on exhibitors, and entry fees were all regulated by the Performing Arts without any oversight by the town. The town manager should review the Performing Arts contract that is coming up for review and revise the entire contract to benefit the taxpayers who own the property. And all of my comments will be posted on Simsbury Patch, Twitter at Joan Co, news feed on Facebook, and Simsbury Forum Topics. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Joan. Would anyone else like to speak tonight in public audience? Yeah.
Could have done it all. Mr. Roy, as the official town manager, welcome.
Thank you. Maria's getting it back very soon.
I opposed marijuana. I opposed it when it first was introduced, and oddly enough, it was introduced by a prominent Republican, Mr. Robert Pomeroy, and a prominent Democrat, Mr. Dave Ryan. As recently as 3 or 4 meetings ago, I attended, along with many citizens, the last zoning law for the relocation of the of the marijuana factory that we have. They want to relocate it from the Ensign Bickford property, which incidentally was sold or leased to a convicted felon, and nobody stopped it. And then they allowed the marijuana to come into town. And the thing, Joan and I, my wife, we had a youngster, we have a youngster, his name is Abraham. And I can recall, just to give you an idea where I'm going, I can recall when the Civic Center in Hartford started the concerts for these hep people, where they would come with the various bands and such, and they were, you know, like the Deadheads and those. They were drug people, and we used to sit in Frank's restaurant, and we put our youngster at the concert because we wanted to give him the, you know, self-being, and he would go by himself, and when he'd come out, we'd meet him, and we'd take him home. And I'll never forget, the first time he came out, he said, "Mom and Dad, you won't believe it." And I says, "What?" He says, "There's a cloud over the place." He says, and I says, "What's the cloud?" It was from everybody smoking marijuana. And the point I'm trying to make, if we don't put a put a handle on this thing, whether a factory or zoning or whatever, it's going to come back to haunt us. I think it's haunting us now. So, but that's what I wanted to address was I oppose marijuana, and I think that this board, when they come for marijuana zoning, though you're not encroaching on zoning, I think it's your duty to ask the zoning people, what are you doing down there? Because still, if you want to look any way you want to look at it, you're the leaders of the town, not zoning. And I find it very odd that the same fellow that's in zoning approving all the marijuana is also the head of the performing arts, where once in a while we have these episodes where we get all the dope smokers. And it shouldn't be allowed. But I didn't come for that. What I came for was our president is very interested in the safety of our children. And he has put together a grant that's available to you, the town manager, and the Simsbury's finest, the police department. And the grant is for the ability to get money to protect our high schools and our grammar schools from these nutcases. And I'll give accolades to the Simsbury finest for handling the last nutcase that they arrested a day or so ago, arrested Thursday. And I think they should be commended for their work, what they did. Because contrary to belief, it is my belief that that man never left the custody of the police department, whether it was Simsbury or state police. And a lot of people are making accusations that are totally wrong. But getting back to the president, and as president, I want all my children in America to grow up in a safe environment and have every opportunity to realize their full potential. Our schools must be safe places. That is why I signed into law the Stop School Violence Act. And I know there's people here that, for some reason or other, they're anti, oh, we can't have guns in the school. They're anti-Second Amendment. That's not the issue here. The issue is safety. And I'm certain if we ever have an incident like we had 4 years ago, that nobody's going to ever forgive themselves for not doing more. And my time is up. But to Mr. Roy as town manager, and to you people as selectmen, there's a grant available, and I think you ought to take advantage of it and apply for it. And what the money is for people to go into the schools, and the federal government will pay for it. And it's the law, Stop School Violence Act 2018.
I appreciate you bringing that to our attention. Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak tonight in public audience? Sarah?
So I know that you're going to be talking about economic development later on in your meeting.
Sorry, Sarah, can you introduce yourself?
Sorry, Sarah Nielsen, Simsbury Main Street Partnership. And I know you're going to be talking about economic development later on in your meeting, but I wanted to remind the community and commend the town of Simsbury that Simsbury has been focused on economic development for many years. I know that there's a lot of talk about what we've done. Simsbury has funded, the town of Simsbury has helped fund the Simsbury Main Street Partnership since 1996. And it is a true public-private partnership, and it's focused on forward-thinking economic development within the context of historic preservation, and our goal is that we can leave Simsbury's legacy and assets to future generations. And just a couple of quick reminders as you guys start to think about what economic development looks like. In Simsbury, we've done grants, the Simsbury Main Street Partnership, we've successfully written more than $750,000 in grants. And to a town like Simsbury, which doesn't have as many grants as more urban places, that number is not small. We've done over more than $200,000 in rehabilitation to Eno Memorial Hall, making it accessible for all people. We're making it we've improved the bathrooms, we've done the ramps. I mean, we really spent over $200,000. I'd like to commend Tom Roy, acting town manager, but Public Works, who helped execute those grants. Main Street also did more than $40,000 in private fundraising for Eno, including the marble benches, the relocation of the Veterans Memorial to make it better for the veterans, the new much larger 50-foot flagpole, I believe, and the gold leaf. So we've done a lot of private fundraising as well for Eno Memorial Hall as our community center. We've done $873 gift cards last year. We kept more than $46,000 in Simsbury during our Shop Small promotion that ran on Black Friday and Small Business Saturday. Just one example of the way that we really encourage people to spend locally, to spend in Simsbury. We do business and property owner advocacy. I'd like to take this time to thank again Mike Glidden and Tom Roy. You know, the town had an issue, for example, with Storytellers Cottage not getting their permits to open. And Main Street was asked to step in with both Tom and Mike to mediate the situation, and we provided some relief to get Storytellers Cottage open. We've worked very hard with the planning department to do things like Bosco's, Anna's Kitchen, you name it. We reach out to the business and the property owners. We walk them through the process. If there are permit issues, if there are signage, change of use, you name it, we're in constant contact with our staff, which is Mike and Robin, to make sure that we smooth the process through, often going through the meetings with them right up through the process until they're approved. We do heritage tourism, which is very big, and I know we have a great tourism committee. We work in partnership with them. But Main Street spent $100,000 doing a comprehensive branding campaign for Simsbury in 2010. We got a federal grant, which was part of the Preserve America federal designation in 2006. It gave us money to do a grant, and we did branding for the town of Simsbury. It's not coincidence that in 2011, 2013, and 2015, Simsbury was then listed on the best places to live for CNN Money magazine. Part of that was also due to the fact that we had a dozen distinctive destination. We're the only town in Connecticut to be listed on the National Trust dozen distinctive destination. In the first 2 weeks, the national media hits reached over 500, including National Geographic, MSN, Money magazine, you name it, all over the country. So it put us on the national radar, and I believe that's one of the most compelling reasons that we hit number 9. Again, we do special events. We did the Taste in Simsbury. We are the co-sponsor of the Mini Maker Fair with the Simsbury Public Library. We're working on the new Simsbury Celebrates. We just got a $5,000 grant to keep them going in this new format that they're doing. We do branding, marketing, PR, publicity. The CT 169 Club will be coming out in a month, I believe, which is a little excerpt from each of the towns. We're listed in there with a nice write-up by Main Street. So again, you know, we do design, parking, you know, I can't name everything, but it really is a comprehensive approach to economic development. It's not just new businesses. It's a real focus on existing businesses, retaining them, branding, marketing, PR, design issues, and advocacy. So that's it.
Sarah, thank you, and thank you for everything that you and your board members do to support economic development in Simsbury.
Yes.
Is there anybody else who'd like to speak in public audience tonight? Okay, and we'll move on to the first Selectmen's report. A planning update. It's my pleasure to welcome a new business to town, Meta Spa, opened this month at Simsbury Town Shops. The St. Mary's School addition is proceeding. The addition will allow for the expansion of classroom space and centralize the business office for the parish. Completion is expected in about a year from now. The property owner of 18 acres off of Route 44, which abuts the town of Canton, presented a preliminary zone change application at the last meeting for the Zoning Commission. It was received well, and a formal application will be coming. The property is currently zoned residential, and the property owner would like to rezone the property to business. At our August meeting, the Board of Selectmen unanimously adopted an ordinance creating a new Economic Development Commission, EDC. Since that time, we received close to 20 applications, and Selectwoman Cheryl Cook and I have been conducting interviews. I thank everybody who's applied to serve on the new EDC, and we expect to make those appointments formal at our next meeting on October 10th. In Simsbury Trail News, National Walk to School Day is October 10th. Simsbury will be celebrating with Walk, Bike to School Day events. The calendar is Thursday, October 4th, Latimer Lane. Wednesday, October 10th is Tooten Hills, and note that that date is different than the original. Friday, October 12th is Squadron Line. We, of course, remind drivers to be careful in the areas of schools during arrival and dismissal time. During the first week of October, Eversource and their contractors will be replacing a transmission tower near where the multi-use trail crosses Route 20. That trail will remain open, but there could be short delays in that area, so please do use caution. The Farm Aid Festival took place in Hartford this past weekend, and on Friday, a group of food and farm activists had the opportunity to tour 3 Connecticut farms, and the Gifts of Love Community Farm in Simsbury was one of 3 that was selected. It was a great opportunity to showcase the amazing work that's taking place at the community farm, which is on land, not a lot of people know this, it's on land that's owned by the town, but it's leased to Gifts of Love at a nominal price. And the produce that's grown at the farm goes directly to people in our community who are food insecure. At the end of this week, Celia Roberts will be retiring from her position at the Simsbury Public Library after 53 years. Celia was originally hired September 1st of 1965 and has remained in that position for her entire career. On Friday, September 28th, from 3 to 5 p.m., there will be a celebration at the library. Anyone's invited to come and wish her well. And I want to thank Celia, and I know I speak on behalf of the board in wishing her well in her retirement and thanking her for her service to our town. On a related library subject, I want to thank everyone who supported the Friends of the Library's book sale that took place over the weekend. It's an annual event that raises money to support the programs, equipment, and many other services provided by our library. This would not be possible without the work of many volunteers who give their time in support of our library. One event to mark on your calendar, Monday, October 1st, 7 to 8:30 p.m. at Eno Hall. Senator Whitgos is co-sponsoring an informational forum on sports gambling. The panel will include online and sports betting experts, and there'll be an opportunity for the public to ask questions. With that, let me turn it over to Tom with the town manager's report.
Thank you. Just a few quick updates. The Board of Selectmen goal-setting session. It's going to be this Saturday, September 29th, from 9 a.m. to noon in Program Room 1 at the Simsbury Public Library. A few quick departmental notes. A lot going on in Culture, Parks, and Recreation. I just love this one. Simsbury Farms Trunk or Treat 2018. There's something very classy about that. That's going to be Saturday, October 27th from 1 to 2:30 at Simsbury Farms. More from Culture, Parks, and Recreation. Their fall recreation programs are now open for registration. If you check their website, they have that information and also information on their Learn to Skate program. Speaking of skating, they are looking for help with the skating rink, and they are taking applications for those rink monitor positions, and again, that's all on the Simsbury Farms website. At the library, Head of Adult Services, Susan Ray, was accepted to represent Connecticut in the New England Library Leadership Program. This was a 3-day intensive workshop, and she was awarded a partial scholarship from the Connecticut Library Association to offset some of the costs for her participation in this important event. Both Susan Ray and Head of Children's Services, Stephanie Prado, will both be presenting at the upcoming New England Library Association Conference. Stephanie will share some information about the library's STEM camps, and Susan will be discussing the library's Repair Cafe. Social Services is having an open house to show off some of the work that's been done, and I think Sarah touched on a little of the work that's been done over at Eno Memorial Hall. October 2nd, and that open house is going to run from 9:30 to 11 a.m. Couldn't do a presentation without talking about Public Works. Got to be self-serving. We're going to be having our annual Touch a Truck event at Boy Scout Hall on October 6th from 9:30 till noon. We're doing that in conjunction with Simsbury Culture, Parks, and Recreation and the Simsbury Library. Great events for kids big and small to climb on our equipment and see how we keep the town maintained the way we do. And we're also happy to announce that at this point in the year we are done with our paving. We've paved 9.5 miles of Simsbury's roadways this summer. Most recently, we did a stretch of a little over 3 miles of West Mountain Road, which was an awfully big project to be completed. And all of that was done with a total dollar value of $1.1 million.
Thank you, Tom. I would be remiss if I didn't mention one other thing that is a late addition. The public and members of this board are cordially invited to attend the groundbreaking ceremony for the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King in Connecticut Memorial. That's taking place October 11th at 5 p.m. at the Simsbury Free Library. Moving on to Selectmen actions. Item A is the proposed water shortage ordinance. And I'd like to begin by turning it over to Chris and Mike, who want to give some context.
Thanks, Eric. Mike and I were appointed as the subcommittee to work on drafts of the ordinance. I'm going to take basically 90 seconds to first talk about what the catalyst for the ordinance is, what does the ordinance provide, and what the history, and Mike will add some comments at the end. In terms of catalyst for the water shortage ordinance, I think Marjorie Winters, chairman of Conservation and Inland Wetlands, set it up very nicely. The commission in the fall of 2015 was really responding to state initiatives as well as state statutes, such as Connecticut Statute Title 25, Chapter 474, Section 25 to 32B, Public Drinking Water Supply Emergency, which is part of, stipulated that the Commissioner of Public Health, in consultation with the Commissioner of Energy, Environmental Protection, and Public Utilities Regulatory Authority, may declare a public drinking water supply emergency. Upon such declaration, may authorize a number of actions, including, and this is the specific wording from the statute, number one, the implementation of water conservation practices, including but not limited to water use restrictions by a public water system or municipality in which the emergency occurs. So the Conservation and Inland Wetlands Commission was responding to the call of that legislation. The state actually provided a model ordinance, which was part of what they use as a framework, and then additionally they had the example of Greenwich, Connecticut, which had actually implemented a similar ordinance and actually had run into a water situation. So that's the catalyst for the ordinance. What does the ordinance provide? As Marjorie indicated, if there's an incident, it simply provides the framework for the town to respond. It includes a designation of either a Stage 1 threatened water shortage or a Stage 2 critical water shortage. It defines the definitions of each stage and what the constituencies are that are influenced by that. It identifies how the town will develop a recommended voluntary or mandatory plan and seek input from those appropriate constituencies impacted. And third, it provides a framework for individuals seeking waivers, issuing warnings and fines if necessary, and providing an appropriate appeal framework to any enforcement actions. So to reinforce the point, it simply provides a best practice response on the part of the community if an event actually occurs. And the history with this, again, Conservation Inland Wetlands approved a draft ordinance in the fall of 2015. Tonight represents either the fourth or fifth public hearing we've had on this. We've had approximately 8 subcommittee meetings in regards to this. And basically what the process has entailed is an outreach to approximately 30 constituencies within the community, seeking their input, as well as referrals to Culture, Parks and Recreation, Zoning, and the Planning Commission. Culture, Parks and Recreation, the Planning Commission, the Zoning Commission, in addition to the approval from Conservation and Inland Wetlands, made a positive referral back to the Board of Selectmen. Those committees also provided us with some feedback and suggested changes. We actually incorporated those changes into the final ordinance, and then we received direct feedback from approximately 5 of the 30 groups that we had reached out to. In each event, we either altered the ordinance in response to those concerns, or we walked through the ordinance and felt that the ordinance as currently written adequately responded to people's legitimate concerns. And then we responded by sending a copy of the ordinance back to everyone who had responded to us with an explanation of the changes that we've made. So that's the history. Mike, anything that you would add?
The one thing I would add is we obviously had a lot of meetings, but we had great input from town staff
from the town engineer to the then assistant town planner, now town planner, Tom Roy, and Terriffill Water was very helpful with educating us as to all the things that they went through. I thought the process was, while very open, it did very much try to address specific issues. And frankly, based on that input, the document changed quite a bit. So it was quite an education for me. So it was a good process.
Thank you. Before we open it up for discussion, I'm wondering if there are any questions that any board members have that Tom would be able to answer at this time about the proposed ordinance.
So I just have one particular about the cited statute, where it's, unless I'm reading it wrong, it stipulates that the Commissioner of Public Health must institute the water supply emergency. So how does that?
Well, there is a scenario where the Commissioner of Public Health could implement an emergency, but there are other conditions as well that could trigger it. So this is just the language that's within the statute.
So I guess, so the first question is this already taken care of because the Commissioner of Public Health implements the restrictions and then those restrictions are followed, or does the Commissioner of Public Health have to declare a water emergency before any other restrictions can come into play?
Marjorie, you look like you're looking.
Would you mind just stepping up just for a microphone?
One of the things on the state level, because of the variations in geology and hydrology of each town, it's difficult for the state to declare a water emergency. In some years, there's a water emergency in the southern part of the state and not in the northern part of the state. Yep. So it's difficult to say the whole state is under a water emergency, and I think that's why they left it to the towns to make the decision. The water companies in the town have better feeling for what the water status is in the individual town.
No, and I appreciate that, but this statute, as written and presented to us, as upon such declaration may authorize a number of actions, including the implementation of water conservation practices, including but not limited to water use restrictions by a public water system or municipality. And it's saying that the Commissioner of Public Health is the initiating factor.
Sean, what that is saying is that's one statute. That is not the entire framework of managing this process. It's one statute that was part of the catalyst of conservation and inland wetlands initiating the conversation.
I'm confused as to why the quoted line, which seems to be doing what we're trying to do, is used as a reason for this ordinance.
Because it's an example of the state action that triggered the state requesting and encouraging local ordinances to be able to manage water shortages.
That's not what this says, Chris. This says the implementation of water conservation practices. This doesn't say the town should go out and impose ordinances on their own.
Yeah, it's a larger statute that has quite a few elements to it that quite honestly goes even beyond managing water shortages specifically, but managing other types of water situations. I put that paragraph in there because it's a specific paragraph of a state statute actually asking and encouraging communities, or at certain times, such as an emergency stipulated by the Commissioner of Public Health, where they will require us to be able to take action and have a plan.
I could be wrong. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm interrupting you.
Sure.
If I could speak, I'm sorry. It's been a while since I read the statute. It was back in the beginning. But I don't think anything in that statute actually prohibits municipalities from developing a plan to deal with a water shortage. In fact, I think the intent was to encourage it, as Chris said, and it has no specific prohibition against municipalities developing their own plan, as long as it's not, contradictory or in any way in violation of the law. And in fact, I think we reviewed that when we discussed the Greenwich ordinance a couple of years ago. But it was an example of a municipality having a water shortage and response that did not affect the rest of the state.
And
Tom, I could be
I just want to
remembering that incorrectly, but that's...
As we've reviewed this ordinance a number of times before, we've indicated that one of the more likely triggers of us taking a look at a local plan is feedback that we're getting from the water companies relative to wells as well as their monitoring of the aquifers.
I think, and I'm not as familiar with the state statute on this, but when it comes down to how a drought would affect the state, I think, Cheryl, you pointed out what happened in Greenwich, and again, they were under a severe drought where the rest of the state was under a less severe drought, and the water shortage down there was impacting their community far greater. With Simsbury's residents receiving their water, whether it's through Aquarian or Tariffville or Avon Water or through their own private well, all of the water in Simsbury is essentially well water. The only difference is whether or not you own and operate your own well that's in your yard, or whether it's coming from one of the larger wells operated by one of these water providers. And what was interesting in meeting with Tariffville Water is they were very clear that they watch the recharge rates on their wells very carefully, especially during times of potential water shortages. And that recharge rate really gives them a number to accurately define the health of the water that they're getting, the groundwater or the aquifer that they're pulling from. So we may see a situation where Simsbury could be affected differently than Greenwich or differently than New London or any other area within the state.
So I guess at a high level, what I'm asking is, do we need the Commissioner of Public Health to declare a water emergency before we can use this ordinance?
No, we don't.
Why not? Because that's what it says, that they declare a water emergency.
Again, I think I was pretty clear that this ordinance, and specifically this paragraph, is not the beginning and the end of what constitutes legitimacy for having an ordinance. What this is an example, one example of a state statute in which we may end up, if the commissioner gets involved in that specific situation, where we may end up being asked or having a water ordinance. That's the beginning and the end of it, Sean. It's just one example. So could there be a situation, such as indicated in this state statute, where the Commissioner of Public Health issues an emergency? Yes. But it's very clear that's not the only circumstance by which we may have a need to implement some water management at the local level. I feel I'm being incredibly clear as to the fact that this state statute does not mandate that we have to have a local ordinance. I simply used it as one example of what was a catalyst for us locally thinking about implementing one under the guidance of the state.
I'm not suggesting it requires this, Chris. What my point is that, once again, the Commissioner of Public Health has the ability to declare a water ordinance with or without our extraneous ordinance.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
with all due respect, the Commissioner of Public Health is in a far better position to determine a water emergency than 6 Board of Selectmen members are.
Well, that's a different subject. So what you're now claiming, Sean, is, if I hear what you're saying correctly, that the Commissioner of Public Health and only the Commissioner of Public Health has credibility for you in terms of triggering an event where we might want to implement the ordinance.
No, Chris, but that's not what I'm saying, but none of us went to school or have any idea when a water ordinance, and that's great, we can work with folks, but there's going to be a difference of opinion on it. To me, there are people that do this for a profession and are paid to do this and monitor it, and it is not the 6 of us.
No, it's the water companies. And so the water companies would feed into us information that would trigger us managing it. And we have the wisdom within this ordinance, and we talked about this a lot. You really can't put into words what's the right action in every case. Mm-hmm. There has to be wisdom of the board that gets applied. So if we receive feedback from the water company, and half of this group feels that that feedback is not at a level that triggers the need to implement the ordinance, then we'll debate whether we trigger it. If the majority feels it should, then we will. So the ability for us to evaluate the experts' input exists within this ordinance.
Are there any other? Yeah, Cheryl.
I was just wondering if, Tom, you could explain how the trigger is developed. I think we discussed this a little bit, but maybe it would be good to explain it for the public, how that happens, what Sean's just talking about. When do we know if there's a groundwater depletion? When do we know if that depletion is serious enough to trigger the ordinance? And how is that different from a aquifer issue? That's
Okay, let me start with the 2 slight variations, and Marjorie's going to correct me if I at all get this slightly nuanced wrong. Generally, when we're referring to aquifers, you're talking about deeper water, you're talking about larger bodies of water where I think there were some emails going around where we were talking about groundwater that would be shallower as a general rule, that would generally be what most homeowners' wells would be drawing from. And again, using my own example of the private well I own and operate 365 days a year, my well's at 80 feet, so it's very shallow. And so I'm very aware of droughts and potential for droughts and what's going on. There are other people within this region that have deeper drilled wells for their homes, but generally you can be drawing either groundwater or water from a deeper aquifer. Essentially, it's all the same water. Once it goes below ground, groundwater is going to eventually feed into the aquifer. There are different recharge rates for different aquifers and for groundwater sources. If you could imagine, it's effectively just an underground river, and depending upon the geology of the area, and rainfall, snowfall, everything else, different sources for groundwater take longer to recharge than others, just the same way as we see what happens frequently with the Farmington River. In terms of recognizing when we go from a threatened water shortage to a critical water shortage, there is a level of debate associated with that. We would have to work closely with the water companies, and as I said, they check every single day what the recharge rate is on their wells. They know how long they ran the pump for. They knew what the pressure was within the water at the time they started. They know what it is at the end, and they see how long it comes back to their normal set point. When they start seeing a problem, we hope that they would reach out to us. At the point that we're looking into a threatened water shortage, I believe town staff and members of this board would be aware that it's time to start looking at it. You would know that you were in a dry spell. The threatened water shortage is really in some ways where this is a new thing, where this board would have the ability to start doing what we do best, which is put out public information to tell people, do you know that there's a drought? These are some things that you can do to start conserving water. Reducing watering your lawn is probably one of the biggest ones, enormous amount of water for that. As we talked about this ordinance, some of the things that we took out were things like having restaurants not put out glasses of water. The volume of water there that you save, insignificant, and we want to focus on what may actually have a difference. As we put out press releases and tell people to voluntarily conserve water, we're also going to be working with the water companies. At the point we start to see that our conservation measures and the lack of rainfall are converging to a point that we feel we may not be able to supply adequate water going forward for the next 4 month, 6 month period, in consultation with the experts, we're going to say, okay, now it's time to start implementing restrictions. And the way this was set up is this board would have the ability to have a laundry list of options, whether it's telling people you can't wash your car, restricting watering your lawns, ornamental fountains, things along those lines. And it's intended to ratchet up slowly, and it's also intended to take residential properties different from businesses. In drafting some of the language, we wanted to make sure that this body didn't go against local businesses and their need for water to do their core functions. Golf courses in particular were discussed at length.
Thank you.
You bring up a great point about encouraging voluntary conservation first and continuing to monitor our levels. You know, hopefully it will impact enough to bring us out of a critical stage. But we all hope that we don't have to use any of the other measures to enforce the ordinance. And I think, you know, we're all pretty confident that our residents are going to respond when we ask. But we all know sometimes things happen and we need to do something else. But for me, anyway, voluntary conservation would be the optimal response. And I'm hoping that everybody would see that. But I think, to your point about the level of response, what makes this ordinance better than what it was when we first started is the flexibility that this board has as decision makers to say, okay, the only thing we're going to restrict now is watering your lawn. You know, everything else, and then we're going to wait. We can wait 2 weeks and see if anything happens, or 30 days. So I think that's a very positive aspect of the changes that have been made in this ordinance over the time that we've been reviewing.
Yeah. And for me, I think it's a really important point that the first thing we're going to do is ask for voluntary measures, and only if those voluntary measures aren't enough would we move to some of the more restrictive parts of this ordinance, which you know, none of us want to do. But at least it gives us a tool, and in my mind, it's proactive. We can talk about this when wells are dry, when there's a crisis, and when we can't be thoughtful. And now we are lucky to have the time to have the discussion and make sure that this ordinance is as good as it can possibly be. So we have the tools to respond if the need ever arose. Is there anyone else who wanted to add anything before we vote? Yeah, Mike.
One of the things that I learned and I thought about and we discussed was how this ordinance would work, and I am a big believer in that the town should decide on stuff for the town. I don't like it when Hartford tells us what we need to do, or someone located elsewhere tells us what we should be doing with the water within our town. And I'm somewhat selfish, but we're the Board of Selectmen for Simsbury, not the rest of the Farmington Valley. So I really like the fact that, to a point, Simsbury is able to decide what is right for Simsbury. And I liked that, the way this was written to accomplish that. We are not an island. If we were an island, we'd have lots of water around us, so it wouldn't be an issue. But
It'd be very salty.
Problem solved.
but you never know. No.
Fighting about the bonding for the desalination plant.
Yeah. Well, I stand corrected. But it would, I do like that fact, and we put a lot of emphasis in writing this to have the Board of Selectmen do many of the things here. I really feel that that was a plus. Ultimately, it does come down to, do we wait until we have a problem, or do we try to do something preemptively? And that gets into a host of other issues. And I'm frankly still going back and forth on this. I have my concerns. Sorry, guys. But maybe my education was not as good as I thought. But I see it as a really big issue. And I do believe that water is one of those things that, I have a very deep well, and I had no problem. My neighbor next door needed to hook up to town water because he couldn't do 2 loads of wash. That's it. The second load was, everything came out red because it was all clay.
Yeah, and can I just say, it's not completely hypothetical. I was sitting in the social services office for some other reason, 2 summers ago, when we did have a pretty serious drought going on, and a resident called to say, my well is dry, can the town help me? And unfortunately, the answer is no, but it was, a crisis for these families who all of a sudden had their wells dry. So, it's something that, may seem hypothetical to us as we discuss this, but it has happened in the very recent past and is going to happen again, so.
Agreed. No, and so 2 points. Agreed, we are the Board of Selectmen for Simsbury, but we border 5 towns?
I believe so.
5, Bloomfield, Canton, Avon, Granby, and East Granby, right? Call 5 towns. They're not passing water ordinances. We share groundwater with every single one of those communities, which again, I dislike the state of Connecticut and the fundamental mess that they continue to get us in, but us thinking we're going to pass a water ordinance and fix the problem is naive. We're not. Avon, Canton, Granby, East Granby, and Bloomfield all need to do the same because we all share the same darn groundwater in one way, shape, or form. 2, why are we excluding golf courses? Because golf courses would seem to be the biggest offender of water and could move the needle the most.
I don't think they're excluded.
They're not excluded, John.
That's a business.
They have unique circumstances, so we identify them uniquely in the ordinance. They're not excluded.
So they are subject to the restriction?
They potentially could be.
We get to that point.
If it came to it.
Or because they're heavily regulated by the Department of Environmental Protection, they may not need to be because they're working with the state appropriately on whatever their issues are.
Because there's already a mechanism in place to take care of it.
Yeah.
Okay. And our ordinance is extraneous on top of that, potentially.
Well, you say extraneous, I say complementary. I mean, clearly there are gaps between what the state legislation covers. I mean, the model ordinance from the state makes specific reference back to this state statute. So the state itself, in putting forward a model for a local ordinance, is recognizing that the state statutes don't take care of 100% of the situation.
Yeah, so I don't have a problem with us being a leader amongst the local towns, and our friends on our borders, they have their own viewpoints and their own considerations and concerns, but nothing wrong in life with being a leader and taking that first hard step, and they may fall afterwards. And when I look at this, no insult to Selectman Kelly or Selectman Payne, but there certainly are a lot of experts who were consulted in this, who do have designations around engineering and water. My knowledge of water is limited to fresh and salt, basically. Beyond that, I think that they would probably fall in the same category as well. So it's wonderful that we've had all of these people come together who fall on both sides, I'm sure, of the environmental spectrum of concern and usage, the political spectrum and usage, and philosophical. And I know that some people who've come to me talk about governmental overreach, and I think that some of us sometimes start with that, and that's a healthy discussion. But sometimes there needs to be government input into our lives to take us down the right path. Collectively, when you work with the folks that you all worked with very hard for the last couple of months, and it's pretty impressive what we've come to. And it's impressive even so that the state is allowing us, which is pretty rare, to sort of set our own dynamics and our own destiny here, which is the opposite of what government overreach generally is from the state. So we are in control of our own destiny here, and it's going to be smart. It's going to be logic. You can clearly tell which way I'm leaning on the vote. But I applaud everybody who came to this. We encouraged the stakeholders. We asked the town to come to the table to help us, give us their input. So when I look at this and I say we asked for input from the town and from stakeholders and businesses and the like, and then experts, they clearly gave us the answers and the definitions and the parameters they wanted in this document. So I'm going to err on their side of their expertise and input versus mine thinking that I know better than they do, that we need this or don't need this. And I appreciate you guys putting this together.
Is there any other,
Just one more annoying point. Operating an air conditioning device, is that the typical air conditioner, or is that people's houses?
Non-recirculating.
Okay.
That is very uncommon.
Okay.
It was actually a concern of a medical facility
Okay.
that used an older technology to make sure that people were kept cool. And so we reviewed it and recognized that with current technology, there was not a concern that needed to be more fully addressed.
Chris, would you like to make a motion?
Sure. I will move effective September 24th, 2018, to adopt the proposed water shortage ordinance as presented, which shall be effective 21 days after publication in a newspaper having circulation within the town of Simsbury. Further move to authorize a summary of the adopted ordinance be published.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
I opposed.
Okay, so the motion passes 4-2.
I'll be the only one here when this gets screwed up.
But just wanted to say thank you to the Conservation Commission, which really led the charge on this, and thank you to members of this board who participated and to all of those who gave input to make this ordinance as good as it could be. Appreciate it. Moving on to item B, Local Prevention Council grant. Each year, this is a grant that the town applies for. It provides funds for substance abuse prevention. Kristen Formanek is the town's Director of Community and Social Services. And would you mind just giving us a little bit of background on what the grant's been used for in years past?
Sure. The grant is presented to us by the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, and our grantor that manages the funds is now in the hands of North Central Regional Mental Health Board, and we in the town of Simsbury act as the local prevention council. So the amount of money that we typically receive each year from this grant is $5,817. And as was already previously highlighted, this grant typically we use to purchase the supplies of Narcan for the police department and also to support 2 distracted driving campaigns for the town of Simsbury. The distracted driving campaigns focus on all aspects of distracted driving, any substance abuse, texting, phone usage, speeding, anything that would cause someone to be stopped by the police. And that is typically done twice during the year, and that helps us to raise awareness in the community that you need to be focused when you're driving. This is a small grant that we receive, and that's basically what we've used it for typically. We are looking forward to, as you know, expanding our office capacity, and we're adding on a new social worker, and that's going to give us the opportunity in the coming years to look to see if there's something else that we should be focusing on with this grant funding. But as was also previously highlighted, we do work closely with the police department on this portion. Are there any questions about it that I can answer for you?
Can I just comment?
Yes.
It's lovely to see you back.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Healthy, and over the crisis. And as the Community for Care Chair, I just want to thank you for all of your support, because I know sometimes grant money is available from these programs to support Community for Care programs, which benefit the children of our town, and we very much appreciate it.
Okay.
Oh, I was also just going to add, in response to one of the questions during public comment, and Cheryl bringing up Community for Care, we are working on still doing a presentation with SCTV on alcoholism, and in particular alcoholism that we see in our senior population. We're going to be working on that. Hopefully, we're meeting in 2 weeks to talk about bringing that back up. So I'm going to fill you in on
Glad
that.
it's coming back.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Good, thank you. Any other questions or any
Just,
discussion?
just a quick one, educational. Thank you. The figure, is it generally frozen, or is there a form? I mean, without getting, if this is going to go 2 hours, then forget my question. But is there a formula that limits us to $5,800, or is it possible that we can get more? Or it's not written in our submissions, and I don't know.
No, and basically, it's a set amount that's been designated to us as the amount is given to the grant administrator to divide amongst the communities that apply for the grant, and you have to be part of also a youth service bureau to apply for this grant. We do get additional fundings through our youth service bureau money, which part of that money is what you see in our total program budget of the $47,000, and those are the monies that we will use for other efforts, our programming in the library, programming through Community for Care, our work in the high school with our youth service bureau board. So that's where there is some more money. But to kind of answer your question, the figure has been static. It hasn't necessarily.
So there's nothing that, relative to this source, nothing that this board can do to assist in increasing that figure by supplemental information?
There's not any way to leverage more funding that I know of. I certainly could ask that question and get back to you, but as far as I know, I don't think that there's leverage for more funding.
Thank you. Any other questions? Is there a motion to accept the fiscal year 1819 Local Prevention Council grant, should it be awarded to the town, and to authorize Town Manager Maria Capriola to execute all documents related to the grant award?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And that passes unanimously. Item C is tax refunds. Is there a motion effective September 24th, 2018, to approve the presented tax refunds in the amount of $4,825.41, and to authorize Town Manager Maria Capriola to execute the tax refunds?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And that passes unanimously. Item D is the Purchasing Ordinance and Purchasing Policy Work Group. So, one of the things we've been doing a lot this year is looking into best practices and ensuring that our town is the most professional organization that it can be. So, there's been a lot of work this year to update policies, many of which haven't been updated in quite some time. We're talking tonight about the purchasing policy in particular, which was last adopted more than 25 years ago. Maria said it would be helpful to have a couple members of this board serve on a work group to help refine it. So really the discussion here tonight isn't on the policy in particular, it's just on if we want to appoint a work group and appointing members to serve on that work group. Real quick, I was just hoping Tom could answer the question, why are we talking about an ordinance as opposed to a policy, potentially?
That's going to be the toughest question tonight. For years, we had always referred to our purchasing ordinance, which, as we went through this process and legal counsel reviewed, actually determined it was not an ordinance, it was a policy. But since it had been included as an appendix in our code, along with all of our ordinances, it just became essentially the vernacular that we referred to it as the ordinance. I believe the recommendation is that we establish a purchasing ordinance which outlines the shell of our goals, and then that we institute a purchasing policy that would have the flexibility to be changed over time by this board without going through the same process that we would to change an ordinance. So if we saw inflation or if we saw the need to allow some additional flexibility for various departments, it could be done at a Board of Selectmen level rather than going through a full public hearing.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Can you explain the Board of Finance's role in this? Because it seems like this work group might be appropriate to include them, or have they already done that? And
well, we have Amy Merriweather here. She's my phone a friend today. Amy's already presented this concept to the Board of Finance, but I think she can best explain their comments and how we can move forward with this body.
So, yes, this was already presented at the last Board of Finance meeting, and the Board of Finance came up with several recommendations for additions to the policy and changes to the policy, which I thought were included on the last page.
Yeah, they were in our packet.
Okay, great. And within these recommendations, some members were for the recommendations, some members were against the recommendations. So they wanted all the recommendations to come to the Board of Selectmen for their further review and vetting.
that's how it got here.
That's how it got here.
Since it will be your ordinance, they wanted you to have the final say and just take into account their recommendations.
And the Board of Finance can't pass a policy,
Right.
whole town
No,
staff to
I
it.
understand that. I was just wondering if they needed to be included in the work group to discuss this further, but they've already done that, so
Correct.
they're.
Yeah. Any other questions while we have Amy?
I have run into doing work in other towns where often the bonds that are required are often not necessary for at least the work we do. And there's a number of times where we're specifically told we have to have a labor and materials bond. It has nothing to do with the work we're doing. It's not a typically that is done for construction jobs. So
Do you want us to put that in there?
of course I do.
starting to
I
work
wouldn't have brought it up otherwise. But I think we just want to make sure that it will work for us and not, frankly, where I've had to do that before, I've had to charge more money to have that in there, and that doesn't benefit the project at all.
Yep.
Towns should want to try to get the best value they can and protection. Well,
So who would be interested in being part of this work group?
Sounds like Mike is all ready to go. I don't know.
water stuff.
Chris and I already did this 2 years ago, right, Chris?
We did do a subgroup, that's right.
We already did this, yeah. The town manager already asked if I would be involved. But I'm happy to step aside, given my hatred of ordinances, for if someone else wants to do it.
How far?
So we're talking, when Maria thinks...
How far are we from actually getting the actual document?
We're close.
I will
I have 2 meetings on this.
Exactly.
There will be 2 meetings, and if we do not
Let me
fix
tell you.
this in 2 meetings, we will not continue. That's if I'm going to be part of this.
Maria's
This will be done
expectation is a couple of...
in 2
I would
meetings.
think that, because after the fantastic suggestions that have already pulled forward, the fact that we've most likely in government had significant modernization of policy and streamlining across lots of agencies that we've worked from, and Marie can pull in from all of her practical experience, workshops and stuff, that we are right there. We don't need a 6-month
No,
working
I don't think
project,
anyone's
right?
thinking about that.
Okay.
But
Sean, we're not going to put in language that says if you bought the wrong color pen.
You
that's
sure?
your-
So, Chris, are you volunteering to serve?
No, I have no experience. I have no experience in.
I'd be happy to serve.
Chris,
I
I think
know,
you're
I will-
sitting for
yes.
leadership on ordinances. You ought to do it with me.
Sean and I actually
I
enjoyed
think-
the experience with Sean when
I
we
think
talked
it's
about
you.
this before.
I think
is fun.
the best place
All right.
this lies is with individuals who most recently and closely overlaid a similar project.
Okay. So, let me see if we can make a motion effective September 24th, 2018, to establish a work group of the Board of Selectmen consisting of Chris Kelly and Sean Askham to review and assess the proposed purchasing ordinance and the proposed purchasing policy.
So moved.
Second.
Can I vote
Any
against this one?
further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Item E is
Story of the
proposed
night.
capital project transfers. So completed capital projects
This
have been
one's gonna be
reviewed
fun.
as part of the year-end closing, and staff is requesting that several funding transfers occur to close out the remaining balances in each of the capital funds. And Tom, if I can just ask you to briefly summarize what we're asking to do tonight.
Sure. Amy just walked away from the podium, but with Amy being our new Director of Finance, she's been going through some of our, essentially conducting almost an internal audit, looking at some of our capital funds, finding that projects have been closed and essentially need to clean the books to get those last little remnants of each project and direct them back to the appropriate fund. There may have been a few cases where there were some transfers that were authorized but had not been initiated, and this is effectively an act to clean up all of those projects. It ends up in nearly a $200,000 increase to our sewer use fund, a $31,700 savings to our general fund, and reduces our capital fund balance from $280,000 down to about $66,000 to where it should be. And as we said, Amy is here if we have any more detailed questions.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Amy?
Oh, yes.
Thought you would.
So on the sewer use fund, don't we bill back the folks that hook up on those extensions based on the project cost?
Yes.
So who's getting the savings here?
Well, it's going back to the sewer use fund where the funds actually already originated from.
Right. But if the project came in cheaper and we billed back the residents for the extension, shouldn't they be getting?
No, let me help you out. On all of the sanitary sewer projects, when we initiate a project, we give the residents an estimate.
Mhm.
We go through and we construct the project, and if it was a $100,000 sewer project, and that's based upon the final bill, not based on estimates or bids or anything else, the final bill, and if there was 10 residents, they would each pay their equal share.
Okay.
And they pay that after the project is done.
Okay.
But we also, through that, have some sewer recapitalizations, such as Masako Street, which are paid directly by the WPCA.
Okay.
And I think this is an example where, of the different accounts that are controlled by the WPCA, the funds had built up in the sewer use fund and need to be transferred back to the general fund for the WPCA, if I'm accurate.
Yes.
So in other words, we didn't overcharge residents for sewer assessments?
That is correct.
Okay. And then on the two bonded projects, how did we not allocate revenue commensurate with the project approval? How does that happen when we go out to bond for a specific amount?
Are you talking about the 119,000, the 101,000?
Yes.
So for one of those was not bonded funds, and one of those was bonded funds. So for the district network infrastructure project, this one was originally supposed to be bonded funds of 1.8 million. And what happened is that the bonds were sold at a premium. So we actually got bond proceeds of 1.6 million, and then the remaining balance was the premiums on the bond, which in past practice, they would put the premiums on the bond against the capital project, therefore reducing our funding, our debt. The finance director at the time decided to take the premiums into the general fund, which is perfectly acceptable, but then they should have borrowed the full 1.8 million, and they didn't. So then the project was short by the 1.6 million.
So the 120,000 is sitting in the general fund for accounting purposes, but we're paying ourselves back from the capital fund?
No, the 1.6 million was the bond proceeds.
Yep. Which paid,
Project came in under budget by 13,000.
okay.
And then the bond premiums, when we got the bond funds in that year, went into the general fund and it rolled into fund balance.
Right.
So then,
So then we expended the 1.8 minus the 13,000.
right.
So how did we expend money that we didn't have?
That's a good question.
Because if
And
it didn't come
the
from
same
the...
thing happened on the 101,000 as well.
Because if the money already came out of the capital fund, trying to understand from an accounting standpoint, if we put the bond premium in the general fund, shouldn't the premium be coming back out of the general fund to the capital fund? Because it was already expended from the capital fund.
Yes, I mean, it could. You could take it from the general fund. But we have the capital reserve for purposes like this in emergency situations where it would be appropriate to take it from the capital reserve fund.
But I guess my point is why are we over by 119 in the capital fund? Where else did we not fund? That money presumably should be going somewhere else, because I'm not aware of where we saved $200,000 on a capital project.
Wait, I didn't follow that last
For
statement.
there to be $200,000 in the capital fund means we either haven't allocated that money to a capital project that's already approved yet, or we saved the $200,000 and it's sitting there to be expended for other usage, right?
Well, it just rolled into the general fund balance whenever they got the bonds for the proceeds. So it's not anywhere, it's in fund balance in the general fund.
So it's not in the capital fund.
Mm-mm.
So then why does it say it's in the capital fund?
No, the shortage of 119,000 is in the capital fund.
Well, we're taking 119 out of the capital fund.
No, we're taking 119 out of the capital reserve fund and putting it into the capital fund to make the project whole.
So slightly different question. How did we get 280 heavy in the capital reserve fund?
That I do not know the history on. I don't know when the capital reserve fund was created or for what purpose. All I know is that we have a capital reserve fund.
And again, I know you're brand new, not your fault, but how did the auditors not? I mean, this is material. I would have expected that 2 projects over 100,000 should have popped in an audit.
The only thing I can think of is that I think they would catch it this year because the project is closing, so they'd be like, where's your extra revenue to offset your expenditures? The only thing I can think of is that they thought that we would catch it and either go back during the budgeting process or go back during the next time that we go to bonding and put the projects in.
I mean, when we cleaned up, was this 2 years ago? And there was an extra...
July 17.
There was an extra 100 and whatever going into the general fund. I mean, I'm not objecting to this. But this is the second or third time we've had to clean up capital funds in the last 8 months, and this is getting annoying. So again, both projects, so the town renovation, that was not bonded, right?
Correct. So the town renovation, that was supposed to be funded through general fund funds, and the transfer was just never made from the general fund into the capital project fund, and so that fund, those monies rolled into fund balance as well.
So we never paid cash for something we budgeted for?
Correct.
So where'd the cash go?
Fund balance in the general fund.
So we took that as a savings that year, or did we reallocate that out to some other project?
I would have to know the specific year, but if the general fund had savings that year, is it potential that some of those monies went into a different fund? Absolutely. I don't know what happened during end-of-year appropriations.
Who was here in 14? I know who was here in 14. All right. Well, you're never going to figure that one out. I won't. No one will.
Sean, do you have other questions?
I'm fine with this. I just don't want to come back where all of a sudden the reserve fund is short and we got to put money from the general fund into it in 6 months.
So there is a schedule included in your packet that has all of the capital projects and the appropriations along with the balance that has been spent to date. So aside for the ones that say completed, which are the ones that we're closing tonight, all of these other projects are in the process, if they haven't already been done so, are being vetted by me to make sure that the money's there, going back to the minutes, making sure where the money was appropriated from to make sure that we don't have this situation going forward.
So that means there could be more?
No, this is it. The other projects are not closed, so there's still time where if there is an issue, it will be known way before the closing of the project.
Amy, this is the first time I've seen this schedule. Was this something that was done in the past, or is this something that you started for us?
Ironically, this is a schedule that is prepared for the audit, and it's included in the CAFR, but everybody's always updated it after the fact from what I gather, and it was just a really good spreadsheet to track everything during the project, so I kind of updated it for that purpose.
Oh, so it's going to our budget.
If you guys read the
I know.
CAFRs in there, just one more, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So these projects aren't closed. So we have reconciled the bond revenue with the expenditures?
So the way that they would go out to bond, some of these funds have already spent money against them, and then we have no bond proceeds. So in, I believe it's the spring, they would typically go out to bond. So we'll make sure that those projects are included in that bond funding to make sure that we don't have any projects that are being spent without money coming into it.
So just said another way, we haven't yet bonded on anything, therefore there's no way for the revenue to be short yet. Because we
Well,
haven't.
technically, the revenue is short because we don't have the bond funds.
But when we
But
go
when we
out,
have the bond, yes.
we're not going to make the same mistake of
Correct.
putting the bond premium into the general fund,
Yes.
and in 9
yes,
months, my head will pop
correct.
off because we'll have this conversation again.
Exactly,
Okay.
and I don't want to be on the other side of that conversation.
I hate to interrupt, Sean, are you okay with that? But
My two favorite topics in one evening.
I understand that. I'm going to ask sort of a general question because it comes up at public building, and I'm the liaison to public building, and I don't pretend to have Sean's depth of knowledge on this, but the Public Building Committee does, at the end of a project, sometimes have funds left over. They are usually very proud and excited that they have come in under budget. And it is a perennial question, where do those funds go? And they always look at me and say, well, we're giving them back to the town. And I'm just wondering if this is going to be an ongoing thing, when we have a project that comes in $30,000 under budget, is this going to happen? It's going to go back to the general fund,
Yeah, so.
even if it's a bonded project.
Right, right. So every year as projects close out, you will see this every single year, the projects getting closed out and either being under or over budget. And when I say over budget, I mean by a few dollars, not hundreds of thousands of dollars. Because at the end of the day, an appropriation is just what you expect the project to cost.
Right.
It's never going to be right on. If it's right on, there's something wrong with somebody that's doing the accounting.
I would agree with that, except that the last time we talked about this, there were projects that were over, and we use language that says in an amount not to exceed. So my question at the time was, how could somebody have allocated more money than was authorized by the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, and the voters? And I understand that projects can come in $1 over, but from a technical standpoint, the language that goes into the voting booth, an amount not to exceed. So we've got to make sure that we're.
And that's correct, and that conversation should happen well before the project closes, which is why we are implementing quarterly meetings on capital projects to make sure those exact circumstances come to light beforehand, and we can come crawling asking for an additional appropriation or transfer from the capital reserve in a meaningful amount of time.
And that's fine. That's the appropriate way to do it. But finding out 2 years after the project's done is not the time to do it. Thank you.
I just thought it's important for everyone to understand where the money is going when we do actually come in under budget. It's going back to the general fund. This is not
It depends.
necessarily going back to,
So if it comes in under budget and you're using general fund money, you can allocate it back to the general fund if you wish, or you can allocate it to the capital reserve, or if the capital reserve is in need of funds. Or if it's bonding money, you cannot take that back into, you can take it back into the general fund to offset the interest on the debt. Or you can allocate it to likewise projects that have been already bond approved.
that's the key question.
That
comes up.
I like to put it back into the general fund because it's clean. Your debt is going out of there, so any savings goes into there. If you're moving it around to projects and then say, this 1.8 and we're only borrowing 1.6 due to other bond proceeds, I just think it gets messy. So it goes right back into the general fund where
I
it came
agree,
from.
but I do hear that discussion quite often.
I'll be there.
Got your back.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions for Amy? Is there a motion effective September 24th, 2018, to recommend to the Board of Finance the capital project transfer requests as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes.
Thank you. Nice job.
Amy.
Thanks, Amy.
Next on the agenda, two public gathering permit applications. The Public Gathering Committee is recommending approval for both. Hi, Robin.
Hello.
The first one is for Gifts of Love's Fall Festival, which will be held at the community farm property. It's a family-friendly event, food, games, hay rides, ponies. Anything you want to, I know, my daughter likes ponies.
So as long as there's ponies, I'm good.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, anything you wanted to add about this application?
No, you guys have everything in your packets that show what's going on. There was just two conditions that were added. As you guys know, that's kind of a new thing that we've kind of implemented. One has to do with Farmington Valley Health District. They just made sure that the applicant is aware that all vendor permits have to be reviewed by them at least 2 weeks in advance, but they're a week out, so hopefully that's already been done if they needed that. And that the fire marshal had a concern about what was allowed to, the barn was allowed to be used for, so there's a condition on there, and that was to be coordinated with the fire marshal directly.
Okay. Any other questions on this? Is there a motion effective September 24th, 2018, to approve the public gathering application for Gifts of Love Fall Festival as presented and authorize the issuance of the public gathering permit?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Item G is the public gathering permit application for the Trinity Church Pumpkin Patch, which will be located adjacent to Boy Scout Hall. Any questions on this one, or anything you wanted to add?
Nope, again, there's just a couple of conditions of approval, trash, because they did say that they were going to have some kind of events down there, blessing of animals, pumpkin painting, story time, little cutesy events, and that the event can't interfere with any events taking place at Scout Hall or interfere with parking for any events that might be taking place at Scout Hall, which I think they're pretty familiar with. They've been doing this for a while.
Sure. Any questions on this? Okay. Is there a motion effective September 24th, 2018, to approve the public gathering application for the Trinity Church Pumpkin Patch as presented and authorize the issuance of the public gathering permit?
So moved.
Second.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that
I
passes
think I'm
unanimously.
next up with you, too, with the conservation easement.
Yep.
Oh,
So I'm just going to
Yes.
stand here.
right here.
On a roll.
All right. So item H is the Hunting Ridge Conservation Easement. And I'm going to ask either you or Tom just to give a summary of this one, because there's a little history on it.
Sure. So this particular lot up on Hunting Ridge, along with a couple of other ones, but every other lot is developed up there with the exception of this one. There's a conservation easement in the front. It encompasses the first 60 feet going into the lot. This has some very unique language that says the Board of Selectmen is in charge of deciding whether or not they can do certain things. One of those things is the removal of trees that are over 4-inch in caliper. So they came in, you guys have a bunch of aerials that kind of show the history of this lot. It has been, as you'll see in 2004, the only trees, 1, 2, 3, those are the trees in question. Remaining are the trees they're looking to take down. They're pine trees. They're being choked out by vines, and the developer is proposing taking them down and putting native trees back in their place. So, and he's actually going to be establishing the conservation easement, so it won't look like it's scrub shrub now. It'll have a nice planting plan. It'll kind of go along with what's up there in the neighborhood.
Are you saying it'll look better than it does now,
It'll look much
potentially?
better.
Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm
Read
saying.
between the lines, got it. Are there any questions for Robin? Okay. Is there a motion effective September 24th, 2018, to allow Greg Maglieri of Maglieri Construction to remove 3 trees greater than 4 inches in caliper located in the front conservation easement at 29 Hunting Ridge Drive with Ms. Alice Daly's approval in the event that the trees are not removed until Maglieri Construction is the owner of the property? Ms. Daly's approval will not be needed.
So moved.
Second.
Is there a second? Second. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes. Thank you very much. Next is item I, which is really the last item of substance on the agenda, the work plan for the Economic Development Commission. So while Mike gets set up, I'll give a little bit of history on this. No action needed tonight. This is really for discussion purposes. The Board of Selectmen formed a work group to focus on getting the new Economic Development Commission off the ground. Myself and Cheryl Cook serve on that work group, and at our next meeting, October 10th, it's my expectation that we'll be appointing the new members. Thanks, Tom.
Sorry, I'm just watching Mike. I'm not laughing at you.
Was the
So,
portion of the show
I know.
as part of, what...
How many engineers does it take to put up an easel?
More than we have.
While they're working on that,
Is this on TV? We got this on TV?
Maybe you could go in front of the camera while we do
Yeah.
this.
so what we want to focus on tonight is what is the new Economic Development Commission going to be working on, certainly in its first 12 months, but also its first term, which is 3 years. Tonight's discussion will be taken by town staff, and Cheryl and I will be giving input, and we're going to be presenting a recommendation to this board at our October 10th meeting, where we give the Economic Development Commission greater direction. So I'm trying to, I don't want to say waste time, but I'm trying to fill here a little bit.
This is what this means.
That's right. Yeah, back when I was in radio, we could do, I could do a long weather forecast, but I'll spare you tonight. Cheryl, is there we've been working on this together. There's been a lot of meetings. Is there anything that you wanted to add before we kick off the discussion?
That would be helpful. I tell you, this was not included in
I don't see how we can compete with that, so I'm
think we
just going to
can.
wait.
It's going to be a while, Mr. Couchman. You might be holding for a while.
I think we got it.
There we go.
Are you going to write with markers on that? It's not going to go through?
Yeah, be
They will
careful.
go through.
It's going to go through to the...
Several sheets.
Sure.
At least double it up.
Yeah, why don't we do 3 to be safe?
Take one more. Thank you.
Well, I have to say, while we've been going through this process, interviewing candidates, one of the enlightening things about this has been the candidates' response to some of our questions regarding their vision for economic development in Simsbury.
Yeah.
And it has not all been uniform. People have had interesting ideas, and I think that I'm better informed because of, some of the information that we've received from people who have participated. I also thought that the information we got from the economic development workshop that we attended, and Mike was there too, and you were there, Chris was there too, really helped sort of bring into focus some of the issues that we should be looking at. I think we really have to sort of restrain ourselves to some short-term, some goal setting, because we really want this new EDC to be successful. So we want some measurable targets that we can, bring forward, and hopefully will improve, the general economic development conditions. So I look forward to hearing everybody's ideas.
Great. So here's my thought process on how we'll facilitate this. So, Mike, first of all, thank you for agreeing to be the person with the marker. So my thought is we'd have one piece of paper where we would have ideas that would be business retention or business expansion, so making sure we're focusing on taking care of our existing businesses, and then the other being around business creation or business attraction, so really growing the grand list through new businesses. Once we get a bunch of ideas out there, this is what happens when you hire a Six Sigma guy. I've got stickers,
All right, yeah.
stars. Everybody, I think, is going to get 7 stars. It's called nominal group technique, and it's basically voting. You can stick them next to whichever ideas resonate with you. And if you really like one idea, you could put as many stickers as you want on that one idea. And I think it'll just be a quick way to see which ideas have more support than others.
Did we tell you the red dot story?
Yeah. I think he was there for the
he
red, he was there for the
participated.
red dot thing,
Just making sure.
which is the first thing that I thought of.
Yes.
I forgot about that.
Yes.
That's all good. I like your idea.
I'll pass these out preemptively.
We put these on each other's foreheads?
Chris, there's no way you're a star this evening.
All right. So before we get into the weeds, and actually I'm just cognizant of the time because we've had a lot of items on the agenda. I want to cap the discussion at about 30 minutes, and then we're going to be together again for 3 hours this weekend, and if we need to tie a bow on this then, we can do that.
How about we cap it at 15 minutes?
Yep.
Because it shouldn't take us this long.
Go 15.
Okay.
So
Well,
we used to have a
okay.
business, was it network, or business or infrastructure fund? So under business retention?
That'd be retention.
It was a fund to help with the rehabilitation of a site, with sewer hookups, with beautification out. The Maple Tree property, I think, was the last beneficiary of that.
Always.
What's that?
Always use some of that.
Holloways as well, yeah. But really good ways to incentivize local businesses to invest
Yeah.
with some community sharing, again, for the
So you
community
have sort of a
portion.
matching fund scenario?
Potentially, yeah, but again, for more of the underground stuff, the utility stuff, not buying them a stove or a dining room set, but again, the cost to hook up to the power or things that are connecting to the public utilities.
I was, as I was listening to all those people, I think we should have a response protocol when a business, we talked a lot about visiting businesses and talking to businesses, but we never got to the point where we said, this person is going to respond, this is what we can do. We need some follow-up, and we need a definite protocol of who's responsible when a business says, I have an issue. I've had a problem getting my sign. I've had a problem, with this parking space in front, Whatever it is, I think we need to have something in place that allows us to respond a little quicker so that businesses don't get frustrated by the red tape.
I think that goes on both sides, but yeah.
It does,
Yeah,
but
that makes sense.
I think we need at least something back and
Please.
forth.
There was I'll wait till you. We attended a workshop, myself and Eric and Maria, a while back, and one of the towns that the consultant cited was I think it was Tucson, Arizona, someplace, and they set a framework that the maximum time from start to finish was X days for an approval process for getting an answer from this department, that department, this department, that department. Now, granted, Tucson, Arizona is probably a little more lenient in what they allow to go up and such, because we have other aesthetic concerns and environmental concerns around here, but I think we should time box, do a metric assessment of our different approval processes throughout the different parts of town, and I'm sure that they can identify process improvements for speed, for guarantees, for whichever it may be.
So just to add on to that, I think it's about how do we get to that same good decision, but how do we do it in less time?
Yeah.
Is that essentially what you're saying?
It is, and I'm sure that the individuals who are working in each of these functional areas think that they're doing, and I'm sure that they are doing the best that they can, but I'm sure they can learn through the process that we can fast track some of this stuff.
Yeah.
And that process should be transparent to anybody who has an issue.
And having meetings and having multiple commissions be at certain meetings as well, that type of stuff.
That is a good.
I'm sure there are reasons why we can't do that, but in those people's minds, but I think we should be looking at that.
Another couple, we've talked about it a number of times here, and it's come up with grants and otherwise is parking, in particular in the hamlets, the different zones, the north zone, center zone, other places, probably for both retention and attraction. I know it's an issue, parking in general is an issue. And while a lot of us assume that the proximity parking is adequate, from a business standpoint, it's not. also wayfinding or signage, just particularly in the downtown area. I stole that from you or someone else came in here, and again, I remember that stuck out to me. And now I see it everywhere. I see it in Hartford, best place to park for the stadium, waterfront. And it's little no-brainer stuff that I think we could really could enhance the downtown area.
That sounds like government overreach to me.
You know,
It's like telling people where.
I'd say we're going to put a picture of you up. I said we're going to.
How big and what color the sign can
That
be?
sounds like you're telling me where to park, Sean. I don't like that.
I'm not telling you where to park. I'm suggesting where to park.
Telling me how big my sign can be?
Are we getting too far afield when we talk about investment in technology? So we talk about, we talked the other night
Fiber.
about Wi-Fi, fiber.
Right.
Yeah.
Stimulating, so and the other investment was identifying potential areas where we can build workspaces.
Can we do?
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the other issues that came up as far as business attraction is readily available data, and I'm sure Sarah can correct me on this, but having up-to-date data regarding traffic rates in different parts of town, occupancy rates for buildings, and commercial spaces, what lease rates are, averages, is readily available data that is important to somebody who's just taking a cursory look. Do I want to go to Avon? Do I want to go to Simsbury? Do I want to go to Granby? We should have that there. We shouldn't have a delay. It should be readily available.
We could also use that, too, to benchmark against ourselves and see if we're getting better.
We should also have be it a sheet or the technology for people when they come in order to zone the application, here's what you need. For planning, here's what you're going to need. This is when they meet. It has gotten much better through the years, but I can remember years ago, people would show up at 5:30 with their plans, and then the commission meets 45 minutes later, an hour later, and you're literally getting the stuff hot off the printer, and you haven't had time to review it. Staff is just trying to figure out, they think it's all right, and that's not fair to anybody to make a good informed decision.
So then a land use process map?
Or development guide, which are
Yeah.
Or like a development guide. I'm thinking more,
both sides there.
probably
Or
on
more
both sides.
lean
It's
on-
on both sides, yeah.
Probably the first, but
It's
it
going to
could
affect
applicable
both
to
your
both.
current businesses, but also someone new coming in that has no idea how we do stuff.
The other thing I want to add, and I can't even believe we're talking about this in 2018, is self-service. We can't, that's a basic thing, and right in our primary business district, there are dead areas.
Which
I'm
suppose
sorry.
That goes along with the whole concept of, that goes along with my point about bringing fiber and
It's all
technology.
technology, but yeah.
Part and parcel of us driving investment. that will
We've
have a
been
return.
fighting that battle for a number of years, but Verizon continues to not agree with us that. But the moment you hit the Prudential building, you cannot keep a phone call.
Or my house.
Well, that's different. You live
I
out in the
gotta-
sticks, but,
I know we've been fighting this, I got to put it on the list, it's so basic.
no, it is. It's a good point. And I don't know how you guys feel, but we've spent millions of dollars on studies over the last 10 years in this town. Just a review of those. Just to bring them all together,
Absolutely.
throw them all on the table,
Yeah.
and because a lot of these ideas are in those studies, right? We spent a lot of money on good ideas that we haven't implemented.
Yeah.
That actually happened at one of our meetings. I think it was Anita came in with all the studies and put them on the table, and
Right.
it's about this high.
There's a
And I
lot
think-
of good stuff in
And
those.
it is a lot of good information that
we've-
we haven't drawn on.
I think that informally, every time we've talked about this, the reconstitution, the first thing we have led with is revisiting what's been done. I think we're all cognizant of that.
Yeah, whether it be the former ADC, the task force, the charrettes, the Route 10, the Route 10 corridor study, I mean, you name it. I mean, there's got to be 10,000 pages of documents out there that studied this town in various ports. There was funding for Weetog Village, where the road all gets changed and the car dealer's no longer there, and all sorts of, I mean, there's a lot of stuff. They want to knock down the Catholic Church. There's a whole bunch of stuff that we're not going to do, but.
Going down a slightly different track.
That one?
Yep.
So I've been, we all visit businesses. We all conduct business visitations, quote unquote. But I think one of the things that I've struggled with is that it's not, I'd love to see the process of business visitation formalized to ensure that every new business is getting welcomed by potentially a member of the Board of Selectmen. I know, Sarah, you do a phenomenal job getting out there, as does other members of town staff, but I think there's something very poignant when your elected officials come in and welcome you to town.
Agreed.
So somehow formalizing that so that we're all able to participate in that. And then we need a way to capture the issues that businesses have. So I've got an idea for some kind of a central repository or a database where we make sure that we're capturing these, spotting trends, and I lost my train of thought, but I think I got it out there. So
you were on a good
repository.
Yeah, I agree with that. That was one of the most striking things about observing the prior EDC. All good folks, but Sarah was the mechanism to understand what was going on in the business community. That was the meat of the update, where Sarah would get up and does a great job of connecting with this individual, and this is going on, and this is going on. It was an educational session for the EDC members. And what really struck me is that should have been a discussion where the EDC members would be contributing information about the business community back, and candidly, so should we. So, good point on the repository.
One of the niches, twice when the Economic Development Commission has studied this before, attracting outside businesses, that was identified is entrepreneurs who want to live in the same town that they own their own business would be very attracted to Simsbury. And I always thought it would be interesting to really get serious about pulling together a package that would speak to that particular niche. And as an extension of that would be facilitating high school students that want to start their own businesses of being able to do so in Simsbury. So.
All right. One in particular, we talked about this a couple of times, and I don't think we settled on it, but the activities that contribute to the character, more of the culture from the Culture, Parks, and Rec side, is there an opportunity to focus there? Because we always focus on the for-profit entities, sometimes forgetting that the 501c3 entities can drive economic development substantially in this community. The statues being an amazing example of that, of how many people have come to town for what the chamber put together with other folks is, and that, again, that's not that wasn't a business that did that. Obviously, they were helping the businesses, but not forgetting the culture part of economic development. Both, I think
it's really, a lot of these are on both.
Probably both.
Overlaps both.
Right.
Yeah, it does.
And again, culture that respects it, because, a lot of us, I think, assumed that we bring in 10,000 people for the Performing Arts Show on the 4th of July, and that's great for businesses. Well, it chewed up all their parking spaces, basically shut them down. So, again, great thing to have so many people in the community, but wasn't exactly the economic driver that we assumed it would be. So how can we make that a more symbiotic relationship?
Yeah, I would echo that the statute probably brought in more business that didn't shut down businesses. I can't tell you how many times on a weekend you just see people, they're from out of town, just walking up and down trying to find the statues.
Awesome. I've seen more people I don't know walking up and down. There was a group of 10 people today looking at the statues.
Oh, yeah. So.
It was awesome.
Great.
Also, no, it's kind of sad to talk about, but when businesses leave, I like the idea of conducting exit interviews to understand why they chose to leave. Somehow formalizing that.
Also, not just focusing on the business, but focusing on the property owners as well.
Oh.
Because there's a lot of parcels, like the one across the street, the one on the southern end of town, that there's an owner of the property that doesn't necessarily own any of the businesses in the property.
Right.
One of the things that there's been, I think, sort of general consensus around is that Simsbury is an attractive place to entrepreneurs. And I'd be interested in the Economic Development Commission providing some recommendations on things we can do from an infrastructure perspective to be as attractive to entrepreneurs as possible.
Goes back to the workspace.
The workspace.
Yeah, that's right.
I think, Chris has
Yeah.
talked about
We're
this
so
before.
far behind the
and
curve
we
on
are,
workspace, it's ridiculous.
Can we start doing the stars?
Let's do
Well,
it.
Chris had a great point when we were talking about this. He said, we're the nicest town closest to the airport, and it's one of those things that, we can say to people, it's not really trite to say that because we, to Sean's point, sell it. The town is a product and we are selling it. And we need to put all of our cards on the table. So, one of the things we need to do is put those assets out there, and I know Main Street does a great job doing this, and the new EDC should take a page and, and continue that process, because as the town evolves, we have more great things to sell, essentially.
I think we also got to talk about our neighbors and how we can work with them too.
Absolutely.
Because, again, we all want the $1 million taxpayer, but if Granby gets the $1 million taxpayer, do we pick up additional homeowners? Do we pick up
Right,
additional
exactly.
family members that can contribute as well?
very
So,
important.
we've
And-
always kind of looked at it as do we win or lose based on projects and revenue, and I think we need to, the whole Amazon concept,
Yeah.
I think was a good point where we finally started talking to other towns and other towns
That goes
started
back to my
talking
point of having the data ready,
Yeah.
have those things ready, because when something is going to Granby, we can say, hey, look,
Yeah.
we have this many vacancies, we have this, available.
How can we help each other?
We don't want to be Route 44. We don't want to necessarily be Route 20 or 75. But we should be okay, and I hope we are, being in between them. And
We're Route 10.
We are actually, we are between them.
you are just so smart, aren't you?
Mike, your point is
He's
good.
the one
though.
with the airport,
The
right?
character changes the moment you turn right on Route 10 from Avon. I mean, it does. And it keeps that character fairly consistently all the way up through
Oh, yeah.
Massachusetts, and I think that's something that we've done well. So we need to keep expanding that in the right way.
So before we do the stars, are there any other ideas we want to get on there? Knowing that I'm sure on Saturday there will be other things we can
As I said,
add.
do you want to star this on Saturday possibly or not?
I'm okay with that.
Should this be a
Yeah, we could
conversation?
wait.
And then- and
We
then
can wait
Yeah,
on
part
that.
of the-
And then our conversation allows us to distill.
I'll turn back my stars. I was so
Bring it back.
I think our conversation on Saturday could allow us to distill some of this stuff.
Give stars back.
Yeah, that's a good point, Chris.
I was so excited to do this. Sir,
You can give it to Janet. Go
I'm
home.
gonna give Eric a star.
We're gonna-
Yes, I am.
we're
Give it
gonna
to Janet. She can do something.
I still want to do the stars on Saturday. You're not off the hook.
Well, the stars are going to be there.
Cold.
Okay, moving
Stars on the ordinance.
Right.
Moving on to appointments and resignations, is there a motion to accept with our thanks the resignation of Darren Cunningham as a regular member of the Board of Ethics, retroactive to September 14th, 2018?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Review of the minutes, we had two meetings a week and a half ago on 9/12. Any feedback on the special meeting minutes? No? Then those stand as presented. What about the regular meeting? Okay, we're good there too. Then those stand as presented. Are there any subcommittee or liaison reports? Okay. Yeah.
Do you want to mention this afternoon?
Of course. Yeah, so in the case of Melissa Milan, who was the jogger who was killed 4 years ago along Iron Horse Boulevard, probably most people who've read the Current know that there is a suspect who is in custody, who was arraigned today, and there was a press conference this afternoon right here where we're sitting. And at that time, I had the opportunity to express both my thanks to law enforcement, but also extend, again, my condolences to the family and her friends and the people who cared about her. I know this brings up new emotions and very raw emotions, and I know this is an incredibly difficult time for them. So I just want them to know that that they're in my thoughts and prayers, and I believe I speak for the rest of the board in echoing that. Is there anything else that anyone wanted to add?
Just that I thought you'd done a great job under tough circumstances today, conveying, I think, the right message from all of us. And again, really proud of our police department. Again, they downstairs with the officers beforehand. There's a lot of pride down there for these men and women being able to solve this case, because I know it's bothered them as much as it's bothered all of us that it went unsolved. And they were very very prideful this morning and this afternoon to be able to walk up there and say that looks like they got the job done. So I really appreciate what they do for us.
Thank you. Is there anything else anyone else wanted to add? Okay. Are there any other subcommittee or liaison reports? Okay. Anything under communications that anyone wanted to bring up? In that case, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Pleasure fighting with you, Zuba.
Sarah.
Hey, Sean. You can't wait to get back to the real job, right?